Guys, it's very clear to see, right, with the return of Mark Fotheringham at Celtic, Intensity is back in my team. Hello and welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see you. Celtic 4, Falkirk 0. Oh, Martin Neil! Oh, Martin Neil! In all seriousness, it's time for the match reaction, and what feels like the first time in quite a while we can be very positive in tonight's match reaction. I mean, it was positive last week when I checked in after the Sturm Graz game. It was a huge Europa League win and we played well in that game, but I feel like there's a kind of unanimous positivity leaving tonight's game from everyone who was there at Celtic Park, from everybody online who was watching at home. I feel like we're all pretty, feeling pretty good. You know, Martin O'Neill's return was something that got a lot of people interested, put a lot of smiles on a lot of faces, and coming back and winning 4-0 on your first night, your first game back, you couldn't ask for it to be much better. A really good performance, a much improved performance on the recent domestic games, what we saw at Dens Park, what we saw at Tynecastle. And listen, I know you've got to caveat all of that by saying, look, we played against Falkirk earlier in the season where we played pretty well as a team that you expect to beat, and you've got to take everything with a pinch of salt. But that would be a pretty negative way to look at things. I know that no matter who was in charge or no matter what the circumstances were, you should be beating Falkirk at Celtic Park quite convincingly. The big test now comes on Sunday, of course. Can you follow it up in a huge semi-final at Hampden? But there's still just so much to be positive and optimistic about, and I don't think we should be robbed of that this evening, especially with Martin O'Neill rolling back the years, him and Sean Maloney, I should say, rolling back the years and giving us something to be optimistic about. Yeah, just a great night to be a Celtic fan, I suppose. Hearts also drop points at the top of the table, which closes that gap. You couldn't ask for it to go much better. You really couldn't. So, new manager bounce or not, a much needed improvement by Celtic, and a performance that would be hard to find any flaws in all honesty. It was always going to be quite difficult to read what Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney would change going into today's game. Not just in terms of squad selection, but also system and shape. And in all honesty, a lot of the shape didn't actually change. It was what I'm used to seeing. I think it was the standard 4-3-3 that I was expecting going into today's game, and that's exactly what we got. Not much changed in that regard, but you don't expect an interim manager to come in and change a whole lot overnight. It's all about just getting the football better, and Martin O'Neill said it very, very clearly in yesterday's press conference. The biggest thing is just winning games. You know, he was asked about what will change, and his exact words were, you know, I will make changes, but first and foremost, you've got to win games. So winning 4-0 to start with isn't a bad way to kick off that promise, you know. But, you know, we just looked a lot better. In that same shape, we looked a lot more fluid tonight. We looked a lot more brave tonight. And I saw a side of Celtic that domestically in these games just hasn't been there. Even when we've been leading games, even in the games we have won domestically this season, it's felt like, you know, we've been a team that's either played well in one half and poorly in the other, or we've went through kind of spells of 10 minutes playing good here, 10 minutes playing good there. But tonight just felt like an overall more complete performance with people really giving it their all. It feels like O'Neill has came in and delivered on that new manager bounce and, you know, put a rocket up the backside of some players. And it looked as though a few of them were just ready to run through walls for Martin O'Neill this evening. So, you know, that's something that you hope lasts, and you hope it isn't just a one-game thing, and I'm almost certain it will until we make a permanent decision as to who leads the club forward. He's the kind of character, the kind of man that you want to play like that for, and he got a tune out of so many players tonight. Johnny Kenny with 2 goals for talking sake. That's huge for him. Huge for his confidence, and just huge for the confidence of the team having a striker that can score goals. Once again, the big task comes on Sunday now. If he can score there, you aren't going to say that he's the complete package or somebody that's ready to deliver after one game against Falkirk. But I would have rather they scored 2 tonight than none. So he's put a belief in him. He's put a belief in the rest of the team. Yeah, just a much better, much more positive performance. And I think you can see that in basically every area of the park. Because for talking sake, I look at that left-hand side tonight, and it was just so much better. You know, there was so much energy on that left-hand side. And it just felt like there was a kind of lease of life down there. Some people might say that's because Tierney was dropped and we brought in Sriracha, but I was really impressed by Sriracha this evening. Tenecti once again, the guy that brings a lot of the direct nature that we possess at the minute, and a lot of the positivity that we possess comes through him. It just looks so sharp. And then you flip it over to the right-hand side where I think James Forrest had a really good game. You know, somebody who's not been used a whole lot this season. He's been more of a kind of come off the bench when we're struggling type player, showing that maybe he is the better option on the right hand side for the time being until we figure that out in January. It was a good performance from him, and I just thought down the two flanks we looked better, and I also thought that through the middle of the park we looked better. I thought we looked a lot braver, a lot more direct. Johnny Kenny, of course, the star of the show in that regard, but in the midfield as well, I thought we were trying to drive forward constantly, and even when things weren't working, I mean, we can point towards Nygren and go, oh, I missed a couple of sitters tonight or whatever, but he was active. He was very active, and he looked a lot more mobile than what I think he did throughout the start of the season under Rodgers. So, yeah, and then defensively we had bugger all to do, so there's no point in me spending too much time there. As I said, I feel like every area of Celtic's game improved tonight, and I'm hoping that's something that can be maintained. It's not something I'm going to get carried away about or over the top about, but there was certainly big improvements, and that matters. It really does. So, I mean, I would usually do like first half, second half. You all know how my match reactions work by now, and I guess I can sort of do that very briefly, but it was a game that Celtic dominated. Like, I don't think there's a huge narrative other than the very much shift in mood at Celtic and the shift in performance at Celtic. I think that's the story itself. But I actually thought that, you know, in the first 20 minutes or so, Falkirk looked as though they were the team that had more of the ball and were kind of, you know, Celtic were kind of feeling their way into the game a wee bit, but that was sort of natural. But after that phase had passed, and especially after we broke the deadlock half an hour in, we were just all over them. We really were. And I think that, you know, with Kenny, for example, who does get those 2 goals in the first half, it's huge for him to get those goals. I mean, just to focus on that for a minute, especially ahead of a cup final on Sunday when you're not really sure if you've got a confident goal scorer, to find 2 the game before, that's massive. And it's not me saying that he's got to go to Hampden this weekend and suddenly score a hat-trick. Christ, he could go to Hampden this weekend and miss 5 sitters for all I know. But what matters is you have a striker who's scored going into that game, because it felt like we were going to go there with nobody in that sort of form. So these things really do matter. They do. And he was trusted ahead of a few tonight. And I think a lot of people were like, oh, it's on the team selection. I went, oh, I was hoping that O'Neill would go for Yamada. Yamada wasn't even on the bench. And I know I've been backing up Rodgers on that decision a long time since he signed, and I think now might be another reason as to why he probably isn't that great a player if he's not on the bench, if he's not impressed O'Neill and Maloney already in training. And obviously Maloney's probably seen him a bit. But that doesn't matter. Kenny getting the nod was a brave decision, and it paid off. It paid off, and that's what I mean. It just felt like on and off the park there was just a lot of bravery in Celtic tonight that we've maybe been missing these past few months. So yeah, first half, dominant, really good, and we carried that over to the second half. In that second half, it just felt like the intensity kept up and the drive kept going, and I think that's what we've been looking for, to carry that over 2 halves. In the second half, we go out, we get a goal before the hour mark through Benji Nygren, who missed a couple of sitters before that, and it's another kind of tap in for him, but we'll give it. He's going to end the season in like 20 goals, while being questionable in terms of his actual performances. And then Tenecti gets his first Celtic Park goal, and it's brilliant. And this is one thing, you know, I've not even touched on this. You know me, I've always I was a huge advocate of Rodgers, but it felt like there was maybe a lack of ideas starting to appear, and maybe he'd lost the creativity and his own tactical awareness. I don't know. But the kind of ability to play the ball forward in different ways rather than having to go left to right into the centre half. You know, that Tenecti goal comes through a ball over the top and him chasing on the end of it. And I think it's very important to stress that Celtic aren't a team who should be returning to the old ways of constantly lumping diagonals or balls over the top. But there's nothing wrong with trying it a few times a game. There's nothing wrong with keeping things unpredictable. And I think that, for me, especially in the second half as the game goes on and Falkirk get used to the way we're playing, I think it's such an important part of the 90 minutes, is being able to be unpredictable and being able to keep things different and to keep the opposition guessing. And that's ultimately how we get our 4th goal. And once again, I can't help but stress that you're not playing against the greatest of opponents tonight in terms of quality, and I mean that with all due respect to Falkirk, but these are the things that catch players at all levels out. Whether you're playing a team that is bottom of the Scottish Premiership or top of the Europa League, these are the things that will catch these teams out, and it was nice to see a return of things like that to the game today, and obviously that will benefit Tenetke and benefit players with quality in the final third who maybe aren't seeing the ball as much as they can because we're too busy passing the ball to fullbacks and centre halves. I think that was a big point that was stressed against Dundee last weekend. There was one moment in the game where we did play a long ball in behind for Tenetke, and it worked and it looked good, and then we just didn't resort to it again in the game. So these are things that should be picked up on. These are things I think O'Neill will be stressing to the team in his short or long time here. We don't know yet. Probably shorter. But listen, 4 goals, clean sheet, much better performance, and a lot of positivity leaving Celtic Park. There is so much to be happy about in that regard. And ultimately, as I rush through this match reaction, because I have so much to do, it's just, I mean, the photos of O'Neill celebrating in the sidelines is just fantastic. The chants of Martin O'Neill around the stadium, it's something I never thought I'd ever experience. I can now say that I have witnessed Martin O'Neill manage Celtic live in the flesh. I mean, I was 5 years old when he left the club. And back in the day, so to get to experience that, even if it's 1 game or if it's 10 games, is a pretty cool thing to say in itself. He's an absolute legend, and he deserves that kind of reaction and such that he got. So yeah, good start. Hopefully it keeps going. And if this freshness keeps up, you know, there will be... See, I'm not going to get dragged into anything like this just now because it's not worth it, and I don't want to be one of those guys that lets good results over... I don't want this to be like 2019 where we gave Lennon the job in the showers, but like, there'll be people out there trying to make an impression right now, and it's a good start. The likes of Sean Maloney, the likes of Mark Fotheringham. You know, these are guys that will be like thinking to themselves, well, if there's a job going here, I'll try and make a best picture or a best impression of myself as I can. But that's a conversation for another day. Listen, I apologise for the sort of rushed and very poorly structured match reaction. I've made it clear I'm very busy tomorrow. I actually have a wedding tomorrow, which means I'm not going to be here to record anything. Which means I need to sit up here recording a video for tomorrow about the managerial situation and stuff like that. So I've had to rush kind of through this. Apologies. Martin O'Neill, ladies and gentlemen. Martin O'Neill, we're back. We're back. Roll on Sunday. Hopefully we can replicate what we've done this evening. Till next time, take care and I'll see you later.